Okay, so my first question that I wanted to ask you is just who are you and what do you do?
I'm Brian Christensen. I'm a professor in the art department at BYU. My area is in ceramics, where I have both degrees. And I got my BFA here in the 1980s here at BYU in ceramics, and then I got a ceramic degree at Washington University in St. Louis. I also have taught a lot of sculpture classes actually in my education. There was a lot of crossover, and still in my work I combine media, but I'm focusing on ceramics now.
Okay, so when did you begin creating artwork and what was the spark that ignited your pursuit of expressing yourself in this way particularly?
I guess I've always been involved with artwork. As a kid, I'd make stuff, and people would respond to it, and that became sort of my way of expressing myself. I mean, some kids were really into getting praise for sports or academics, but I always found it really rewarding to engage in artwork, and it's also a way to just express my ideas, my feelings about things that surround me.
What kind of stuff did you make when you were a kid? What kind of things did you start out making at the very beginning?
Well, I would do drawings and little watercolor paintings and things like that. But I'd also, tie a pocket knife to a long stick and make it into a spear, and things like that. I was always just really into making stuff, and I was also interested in things that my brother did. My brother shaping surfboards and helping my dad fiberglass a canoe, watching my dad he was a dental technician doing crown and bridge work, which were little sculptures, and I always really reacted to people making things with their hands, and I did too.
So, what has your journey been like into the world of fine art, and what's that journey been like for you?
Well, for me, like I said, I've kind of surrounded myself by fine art. To tell you the truth, in high school, I was making pretty watercolors that would please my mom and people around me, and it wasn't until college that when I started getting broader exposure to what art could be, that I realized that I was really interested in sculpture and what that meant to engage with the contemporary art world, what art could be other than craft, how it could really be about ideas.
Okay, so that kind of brings me to the next thing I wanted to ask you, which is what particularly about sculpture as a medium has attracted you to that, to working in mostly sculpture now?
Yeah, and I should qualify that in that I think of ceramics itself as being sculptural, even when you're making a teapot or something like that. The work that I show most competitively and sometimes sell, sometimes get into better shows and so forth. Tends not to be functional work, rather sculptural kinds of things in clay and other materials. But I still really react to just forming with my hands, and nothing comes closer to just raw design than designing on the potter's wheel, and it can go from anywhere to from functional things to rotational things that come off the wheel, and then you alter them and they just become a sculptural form. But I think what it is about sculpture in all mediums, whether it's bronze or welding in steel, is that it exists in real space. It's not so much about the illusion of space, but it's the making of artifacts which really interests me. Even in the digital age, in fact, in the digital age, the lines are blurred a lot more because I've learned how to render something like a realistic head on a digital pad as a 3D model. It's never existed as anything but a drawing, but then it's printed out as a 3D print, and that really is a way of thinking that didn't exist even 10 years ago. All of those things interest me, but to tell you the truth, although I may be able to render a head faster digitally, I react more to making a figure, making a head, making a pot with my own hands, and I still think that the artifact has value, maybe more than ever, and I think it's a way to tether myself and other people to the humanity of art.
So as you're making these artifacts that are a little bit more rooted in humanity, what kinds of themes and concepts and ideas specifically do you try to explore in your work and try to convey to other people with your work?
Well, I've been doing some self-portraiture that is a way of kind of examining myself at different periods of life in different states of mind. I find that interesting. I also find it interesting to, I've been making large heads that resemble various people in various situations, different attitudes, and I like looking at the human head as being an expressive and a center and a thought center of the body, and a connection to controlling who we are. So I find heads really interesting. I'm also interested in just formalism, the way shapes come together, and that might apply to the figure as well. I mean, rendering the figure is one thing, but what you do with that figure becomes a matter of formalism, how it reacts with its environment, and I'm always thinking about those kinds of things.
Well, I think those are some really interesting observations and concepts and ideas that you've been formulating. And then one of the things I wanted to ask you was, kind of moving on from that question, which has been the overall most challenging aspect of the creative process that you personally use in your work?
I think the most challenging aspect is what I've heard from a former colleague describing as digging a deep enough hole. So I dig a lot of exploratory holes, so to speak, trying out a lot of processes, a lot of philosophical ideas, and out of those, sometimes I'll let those holes stay there shallow, and I'll revisit them. But I guess the challenge part is picking one and committing to it, and digging a deep enough hole that that I can strike gold or oil or whatever it is. The success that whatever success that I've had comes from making that decisive move to really dig a little deeper and to accentuate an idea and to make more than one of them. It's a matter of really committing to an idea.
The art world is a really exciting place, and it can be hard to wrap your head around one thing or one artist or movement. But what in the art world are you most excited about, just in the world at the moment, that you've kind of been looking at and been excited about?
One thing that I've been really excited about, and this might seem a bit peripheral to the mainstream art world, but an observation that I made, and I can tack it down to 2014, was that year, or previous to that year, when I'd make annual trips to New York, I noticed that in the blue chip galleries there was very, very little ceramic work, because it was sort of pigeonholed as a craft medium. But in 2014, suddenly there was clay in just all over Chelsea. You just see it everywhere. And in subsequent years, things chilled out a little bit, but now you do see clay in New York. And what I've noticed about it is that it's moved into the mainstream of sculpture. And one thing that I've noticed about it is that you'll see the artists treating it not as a precious craft, but treating it like a painting, like a sculpture, or with clay, it could be somewhere in between painting and sculpture. I've noticed a trend of people, of clay artists, doing really, really rough and visceral work, but tying it in with pedestals that might be really random, like a tree stump or a found steel structure or something like that. And it's almost like, with all the color that's possible with clay, some of those pieces that I was looking at in New York really felt like an abstract painting coming off the wall and coming to life in 3D in ways that I hadn't really even seen it in the sculpture world, or even seeing someone like Franz West, who makes things out of styrofoam and fiberglass and paint, but it just looks like clay, as if it were made out of ceramics. I feel like this cross-pollination and less exclusivity about material itself is an exciting development for me personally. Again, this isn't like a huge art world movement. It's something that affects me and my engagement with clay in a new way, and I've been very excited about that.
And that kind of brings me actually to my last question here, which is I want to know what advice you would give to others that aspire to work within the landscape of 3D art and sculpture, and anyone who wants to get into this medium and landscape.
I would say that if you are interested in working three-dimensionally, that you go out and see a lot of art and see what is being done, and also look at your own surroundings and what can be done with what you have at hand. I would also say that it's not all dependent on formal skills and crafts. I would say determine first what you're interested in and what you can do on your own, and then start building sort of a portfolio of skills, and go out and take like if you're interested in welding, take a welding class, from the university, from a community college, from any source that you can tap into that for that. If you're interested in ceramics, see where you could buy some clay, where you can have some things fired. Consider what you're prepared to do with it. But I'd like to really point out that it's not all about those formal crafts. Those are ways of developing ideas, and you've got to start there. What are you really interested in?
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice, and I believe that's all we have time for today. But thank you for talking with us, and we appreciate it.
All right, thanks.